Harvey's Hot Takes is our weekly segment with Bryan Hayes from TSN Radio. Every week, Bryan dishing out takes as hot as a Harvey's original burger. There's that burger. It went so fast. Bryan, we are contractually obligated to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs on this network. So let's talk Leafs and Bruins, the Big Five in Toronto. If you're not familiar, rest of the country, that would be Matthews, Marner, Riley, Tavares, and who am I forgetting? Nylander. There we go. So, out of those five, Bryan, who is under the most pressure to perform in this first round against Boston?
Well, I'm glad you said Nylander, although I'm not going down that path. I will say Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner has to step up in the playoffs here because Nylander, contractually moving forward, Jay, Nylander signed his deal, right? The Maple Leafs are committed to him. Auston Matthews has obviously signed his deal. He scored 69 goals this season. They're committed to him. He's committed to them. John Tavares is a different story. He's got 1 year left, but full protection. No move, no trade. He's not going anywhere until his deal expires, and obviously he is playing a lesser role in the team today than he did when he originally arrived. So if there is ever going to be changes, drastic changes, if it's concluded, Brendan Shanahan, Keith Pelley, the new man at the top of MLSC, if it doesn't go well for the Maple Leafs and the new GM, Brad Treliving, decides we need to make changes, it's likely going to be Mitch Marner because he is the odd man out based on his contractual situation. But I also look at simply what he needs to bring to the table in terms of his playoff reputation. Yep. You look at his stats. He's put up numbers. Right? And just like Matthews, just like Nylander, the Leafs have offered them a playoff opportunity every single year. From rookie season all the way up until this season, their 8th year in the NHL. They go to the playoffs every single year. He puts up numbers, but he tends to fade as the series goes on. And he hasn't had big moments like game-changing, series-changing, I'm taking over type of moments, and he's capable of that. He's one of the 13 to 15 best players in the league. We do the list every year. TSN top 50, projecting who the best players are going to be. Mitch Marner's always in the top 15. He's a really good player. He's had injuries this year. He's moved down the lineup a little bit this year, but he can change his whole reputation when it comes to the playoffs by taking over. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for him against this team and the way I believe Sheldon Keefe is going to utilize his best players. If and when Domi returns, I think it's imperative they go back to Bertuzzi, Matthews, and Domi. That's going to suck up a lot of oxygen in terms of the way Jim Montgomery and the Bruins decide to attack this team. That leaves Marner likely with a lesser matchup, a matchup he can chew up. Up the middle of the ice, Matthews has got to be great. He's got to be great. We know that going in. Whether it's Charlie Coyle he's competing against, Pavel Zacha, there's no excuse for him not to torch the middle of the ice against Boston. On the wing, it's a different story. David Pastrnak is a superstar. Brad Marchand is a superstar. One of Nylander or Marner, and I'm looking at Mitch Marner, needs to at least perform at the same level as one of those guys, if not outperform them, for this team to have success against the Bruins. It's time for Mitch Marner to show up in terms of his playoff reputation and in terms of his future here in Toronto.
Bryan, this has been one of the best NHL regular seasons we've seen in a long time, and it's really reflected in this race for the Hart Trophy for the most valuable player in the league. We've got four names it's ultimately come down to. Nathan McKinnon, Nikita Kucherov, Auston Matthews, and Connor McDavid. Of the four, who ultimately do you feel comes out and wins the Hart Trophy this year?
Well, the books would indicate, and I think the general consensus would indicate, McKinnon will win the Hart despite having the least memorable season, Jay, which is really shocking when you consider what we're talking about here. It does feel like the lifetime achievement is being applied here to McKinnon because Kucherov already has a Hart, Matthews has a Hart, and McDavid's got multiple Hart trophies. And he's been outstanding this year. This is not about putting down McKinnon. He's been unbelievable. It would be really, really difficult to pick out who should win the Hart and also who should be excluded from the finalist list. Only 3 guys are going to be at the award show. There's going to be a 4th guy that won't even be invited, which is actually crazy when you really think about it. But McDavid hit 100 assists. Kucherov hit 100 assists. Prior to this, it was Gretzky or Lemieux, the 3 greatest players of all time, the only guys that ever had 100 assists in a season. McDavid's done it. Kucherov's done it. We'll be talking about that for decades. 30, 40, 50 years from now, they'll be referencing the seasons that Kucherov and McDavid had simply because of those statistics. And Austin Matthews, he did everything he could to get to 70. He didn't get there, but he still set a new standard in terms of the modern game. 69 goals is absolutely absurd. Alex Ovechkin, in my opinion, the greatest goal scorer of all time, his top-out season was 65. The modern era of the NHL began post-lockout, salary cap era. The new bar has been set. It's 69 goals. We haven't seen that in 30 years. I don't know if and when 69 will be top, but it could be another 30 or 40 or 50 years before we see that. Nathan McKinnon, he is 2 points away from setting a franchise record for points. That's if you include the Quebec Nordique. Peter Stastny. He's not going to catch Michel Goulet or even his current teammate Mikko Rantanen in terms of goals for the season. He's had a great year, but he's not going to set a new team record for goals in a season. He may not set a new team record or franchise record for points in a season. So he'll likely win the Hart. And in 5, 10, 15 years, we'll wonder who won it that year. We'll go back and look at it and we'll say, wow, McKinnon, those are great statistics. Who lost that year? And we'll say McDavid had 100 assists, Kucherov had 100 assists, and Matthews had 69 goals. Those three players in their seasons and their milestones will be talked about for a long time. McKinnon's statistics in season likely won't be.
That's a great point by you. Finally, I don't know how much you've been enjoying this NBA play-in tournament. I love it personally, but Wednesday, Canadian Press article came out. Gary Bettman says no appetite to expand the NHL playoffs. He doesn't want to go to 18 teams, doesn't want to go to 20 teams, doesn't want to play in. How do you feel about it, Bryan Hayes?
Yeah, I think it's typical of Gary Bettman. I think what's clear here is nothing will change in the NHL as long as Gary Bettman is in charge. He's the longest-standing Big Four commissioner by a significant amount. He's stubborn. He's set in his ways. He believes what he believes, and he will not budge, right? He'll put teams in Salt Lake City. He's cool with doing that. He's likely going to go back to Atlanta for a third time. He may end up back in Arizona for a second time, and they haven't even left yet. So he'll expand in terms of teams, right? Vegas is in here now. Seattle's in here. There likely will be more expansion in the future, but he's not willing to look at playoff expansion. And I'm not surprised because of the way he operates, but for me, this is a no-brainer. I'm with you on this in terms of building events, right? Building big moments for your fans and for the TV audience. I understand that it can cheapen your regular season, but the truth of the matter is North America is a playoff continent, right? This is not like the EPL. This is not like the Bundesliga and soccer in Europe, where it is just about pursuing the cups and pursuing the regular season. This is a playoff continent. And if you can expand the playoffs, what you do is you build up attention for the playoffs. You build up events. And like we've seen in the NBA, we've seen Major League Baseball expand their playoff scenario. We've seen the NFL, the league that owns North American sports. They continue to expand and work on things. And at a minimum, what you could do, and Bettman should know this by now, is give it a shot. It's your league. You don't have to run things through Congress or Parliament to get it flipped again. Try something. If you don't like it and it doesn't work, revert it and go in a different direction. But he's completely adverse to it. I think the Arizona Salt Lake City thing is probably the best example of that in terms of how stubborn he can be. That team should have been out of Arizona probably a decade ago.
Yes.
And the only reason it kept staying there was because of Bettman. Finally, he concluded it has to change. But if Bettman's still the man in charge, the playoff expansion won't happen. Another team coming to Canada won't happen. I think there's a lot of different things we could list that simply won't. It's stale in many ways, but that's the way Bettman operates at this point.
We'll just have to wait until Gary retires and Craig Button becomes the commissioner of the National Hockey League. That's when we'll get our playoff expansion. You know, just like Harvey's has been serving Canadians for 65 years, this guy, Bryan Hayes, serving up takes since 1983, back when the NHL had 21 teams. It was a pretty fun league back then. Thanks, Bryan.